The Soviet system weaned people from keeping diaries, especially in 1937. It was deathful. And we had to have authenticity of the siege. Thanks to the efforts of Alla Bilyakova, a journalist, we found the diary of a boy called Yura Ryabinkin. On the 22nd of July 1941, the war began, and so did Yura Ryabinkin's diary. He started it on the first day.
Good morning, comrades. Let us do the first exercise. Stand in basic positions, heels in, toes out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Take a deep breath, and we start. Out, in, out, in.
Here, at 34 Sarvaya Street, Ryabinkin family lived before and during the war. A common Petersburg family, a mother, a son, and a daughter. Now, there is a bank here. You would not recognize anything. Irina Ivanova Ryabinkin herself, this is the daughter who was 8 then. We have come here now, and she cannot find her flat anymore. The flat where everything I will be telling about happened. When Ales Adamovich and I came here somewhere in 1978, 1979, on a fresh trace of Yura Ryabinkin's diary that had been found, everything was different. I am just mentioning how fast life goes by.
This is my brother's diary. We used to live there. The diary came out of nowhere. I do not know where it comes from. I never saw him writing. I did not suspect, did not know anything about the diary. I saw it for the first time and took it in my hands sometime in early 1970. Just a writing book.
What struck me in this diary was the introduction to the diary. Where he tells that he is Yuri Ryabinkin, born 1925, and that his mother works there and there at the trade union library. My sister, Irina, is 8 years old. My father, who was persecuted for political reasons in 1937. Quite a bit of personal background. It was strange, as if he knew that the diary would be of some historical significance. And he was pre-notifying the reader about his CV facts. In the first days of the war, he is rushing about, unable and not knowing where to find a place for himself in this new war life. Well, watch on roofs, well, they put out flame bombs. Then he was happy. He and his mom were going to build defense works near Luga.
On August 30, Yura wrote, "I feel dreadfully decadent. I do not see anything in front of me, even mediocre. I'm not capable of bringing to life my secret dream, the Navy."
The entry that especially struck me was when he wrote in late August, "Leningrad is threatened to be cut off from the USSR. Our city authorities did not yet pay attention to this threat at this time. In the meanwhile, the limitations in food were beginning to show then. People stood in queues when it was still dark from the early morning. From Yura Ryabinkin, this meant his new responsibility. He is the man who must provide his family with food.
From Yura's diary, September 1st, 1941. Today, on September 1st, there were no school classes. It is not clear when these would start. Starting from September 1st, food supplies are only sold at rations, even matches and salt. You have to have cards for everything. The famine begins slowly but certainly. Leningrad is encircled. The German assault forces cut our city from the rest of the USSR.
And nearby, in this flat, the following was going on. The Egoshins. He was a group manager, a high-ranking officer, who received his ration by the use of special cards, and maybe even without cards. Additional food supplies. There was meat and butter and everything, sweets and other foods, the supplies of which were limited at that time. And here in the kitchen, behind a partition wall, a life without hunger was going on. By that point, it could have been observed with some discontent or perhaps some criticism. But as time went by, the gap between these two modes of life, this family and that family, began to grow. And this was beginning to, you see, affect things all around.
From Yura's diary. But what is most insulting, what is the worst thing for me is that I'm living here in the cold, hunger, with fleas. And next to us, there's a room where life is absolutely different. This is called envy. This is what I feel thinking of Anfisa Nikolaevna. But I cannot fight it.
The Yegoshin family consisted of Yegoshin himself and his wife, the young and beautiful Anfisa. She was not a bad person, Anfisa. She was mostly at home, and that meant she sometimes ran into Yura. She drank. She boozed a lot. She surely made him indignant by the fact that she ate enough. But she was, at the same time, a kind person. She sometimes shared what she had, well, soup and peas, and all kinds of food, which she gave to this family. Hunger was growing stronger and stronger. And hunger, you know, it created a situation for Yuri of such conflict, which stunned, just shocked us in this diary for the first time. Here he was, coming back with bread, the ration of bread, a piece of bread he received for his mother, his sister, and himself. They used to weigh bread very accurately then. Suppose exactly 600 grams for the three of them, or whatever there was. They cut a piece of bread, then there must be another small piece, a make-weight. He was walking, and on his way he could not help himself. He was a young boy of 16. He was growing, his body demanded it. And he ate this make-weight. He ate this make-weight and started reproaching himself, and began to realize that he had eaten everybody's bread. Not only everybody's bread, but he was supposed to have less than both of them. His mother had a working card. Yura had a child's card, and Yuri, a 16-year-old, had a dependence card. He had to have less than anybody. Less than the two of them. He was the third who got less. A second and a third day, and the longer it went, the stronger became the conflict between his hunger and conscience, or his honesty. And hunger won. Hunger won. And he recorded it all. He wrote everything in his diary. Hunger won. But his conscience was also waking up and starting to work. And as time goes by, we see this struggle between conscience and hunger more and more clearly.
From Yuri's diary. November 10. I understand that only I can get food and bring back to life us all, the three of us. But I lack the strength, the energy to do this. Oh, if I only had felt boots. But I do not have them. And every cue brings me closer to pleurisy, to a disease. I'm sitting and crying. I'm only 16, after all. Bastards, those who brought about this war.
These are bank safes here. And then during the war, here was a bomb shelter, and people came down here during air raids.
Here were benches. Here were such racks up to the ceiling all around, full with some folders, some paper folders, and we got the possibility to go down here as to a bomb shelter. The siege is a terrible thing. It's all over. I remember it. Certainly, I remember it. Here are 3 rooms. The largest one, close to this office, then was the middle-sized room, the dining room. And the next room, smaller than the others, was my brother's room, and Degashin settled there. And these rooms soon became uninhabited. It was cold, and in the kitchen there was a stove, and so we lived in the kitchen.
Their dream of evacuation was becoming more and more pronounced. But evacuation was still impossible because the ice on Lake Ladoga had not become strong yet. Yura had one very old dream to study at a naval college. But nothing came out of this either. We did not find the reason in the diary at first. He was somehow hiding this reason from himself, and he confessed only afterwards. The thing is that he had very poor eyesight and weak lungs. He mentioned it now. On the whole, a diary is always a test of a person who is writing it. Even great writers could not spare a secret in their diaries, you know. All diaries of the classical authors, all published diaries, which we consider wonderful documents of the past, in all of them, there is some cunning of the authors who cannot afford to be candid all the way. Yura does not have this. This shocked me and Adamovich. He had some pitiless frankness towards himself. This, we searched long for a definition. This frankness was evidently dictated by the talent of his conscience, the conscience talent which made him confess all his most unseemly actions. Here he writes, This is December. He recalls his sins. I ate a cat, stole from Anfisa's pots. I remind you, Anfisa was Egoshen's wife. Held back a spare crumb from my mom, from Yura. Cheated on them. I was frozen in queues and swore and fought at the doors of the shop to get in and get my 100 grams of butter. I am all covered with dirt. I am lice-ridden. I have understood, although not down to the bottom, my rude, egotistic nature. Could it be that I can never make it right? When we were reading it, this story of inner struggle, we kept asking ourselves, what is conscience? Where does it come from in a human being? Whatever is it given for? Such an inconvenient, unnecessary, you understand, thing, which sort of does not help in anything, but keeps interfering with a person. What is it? Where does it come from? Yura's conscience is aggravating. Hunger is aggravating, and his conscience is too.
November 29th, 1941. At home, there's cold, hunger, crying. Nearby are the Egoshens, who eat fully. At home, there's not a piece of bread. They give only 125 grams of bread for a person a day. But there's not a crumb of bread. Nothing one can eat. What kind of egoist am I? I have hardened. Who have I become? Do I look like anybody I used to be 3 months ago?
Sometimes he knew beforehand that he would not be able to cope with his hunger. And he kind of looked for some protection in his diary, tried to prevent himself. Here, for example, is an amazing story. He writes here, tomorrow, if everything is the way it is today, I will have to bring all gingerbread home, but I know I will not be able to cope with it. And I will eat at least a quarter of a gingerbread. Here is how my egoism manifests itself. It means that he imagines the awful power of hunger in advance and wants to prevent himself from doing it, to strengthen himself somehow. The diary is like a history of his oaths to himself. This is his possibility to prevent his unseemly behavior. Perhaps today it will seem strange and even petty to someone, this quarter of a gingerbread. But it meant a lot for Yura, for this hunger which he felt, and which was ruling the city. For all of them, the people of the siege during that time. Here is when a human being is put to test. Here, the reserves of honesty and purity were put to test. Well, how should I put it? If we say, as they used to say before, the fear of God, which is inherent to a human being.
December pages of the diary. Mom's foot swelled badly yesterday. The question of evacuations is still open. I cannot take away a piece from Ira or Mom, for I know now what even a crumb of bread means. But I see they share with me what they have, and I, a bastard, am stealing the last from them. I know, would anybody offer me a deadly poison which brings an easy death without suffering in my sleep? I would take it. I want to live, but I cannot live like this. But I want to live.
Yura's mother was all the time busy to speed up, to arrange this evacuation because she felt her strength was fading away, as well as the strength of both of her children. And finally came the day when they got their permission for evacuation. But it must have come too late. Yura did not have any physical strength anymore. He was exhausted to the limit and unable to walk to the railway station. His mother did not have the strength to pull them both on the sled. The only thing she could do is take Yura. They loaded the sled with some lightweight load. She left her son and went to the railway station. This is a widespread tragedy of those days and those months. The choice, the agonizing, dreadful choice of a mother, a father, or a husband, that someone of the grown-ups must make between their own children. And Yura stayed. The last record in his diary is made by a very slack hand. They left to be evacuated, his mother and Yura. Their way to Vologda took 16 days, and his mother died at the railway station. The way she managed is also, the phenomenon of those times, when it is unknown how a man absolutely exhausted and worn out by hunger could find the strength when he is supposed to die, but does not die. And she did not die until she took her daughter to Vologda. And Yura stayed. It is unknown how his diary finally got to other people. It is not known what the last days or hours of his life were either.
I asked the people from our house who survived, the people who knew us, but the house was very small there, a back wing. That is why they knew each other so well, and they knew him. Nobody could answer this question. Nobody could answer my question.
And behind the wall, at the Igashins, there is food, and it is warm.
And it seemed to Adamovich and to me, and now it seems even more so to me, that the story of Yura Ryabinkin's struggle with his conscience is very important for any person. It is not that the conditions were exceptional. The thing is that expecting so much of one's conscience, its work, this is what a modern man lacks so much. This is what has not been kept and has hardened today so much. It happens so rare. It so rarely opens in our life.
From Yura's diary, Mom says it is not an appropriate time to keep a diary. If I never have to read my diary over, someone else would. He would know what kind of person once lived on Earth. Ryabinkin Yura. And somehow a phrase from Gorky's Klim Samgin came to my mind. And maybe there was no such boy. A man lived. There is no man.